2007, 2008, 2009, and 2010, which were first read, be substituted for Senate Bills 1010, 1008, 1007, 1006, 1005, 1004, 1003, 1002, 1001, and 1009, which are identical, and be placed under the order of business, third reading of bills.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. I spirit to have it, do have it so ordered, placed under third reading of bills. I'm asking for your indulgence for just one moment while I have a slight computer glitch up here, so it'll just take a minute, I hope. Still waiting on the computer. Huh? Sorry. All right. Thank you for your indulgence. I'm going blind, which may help those of you who hope that I'm quick. But anyways, we're going to go third reading of bills.
House Bill 2001, an act amending laws 2012, Chapter 294, Section 124, amending laws 2012, Chapter 294, Section 130, making appropriations and budget reductions, limitations, transfer for the budget, different departments of the state, for state institutions, for public schools, for fiscal years 2012, 2013, 2013, 2014, and 2014, 2015, providing for certain reporting requirements.
You've heard the third reading of HB 2001. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The system is now open. The Senate will now proceed to vote. Senator Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Permission to display my vote?
Please proceed.
And actually, I'd like to ask, just to make sure I have this correctly, and hopefully somebody on the floor can answer it. I know their numbers are different than ours, correct? And so this one is really like our Senate Bill 1010. Can somebody nod yes or no? Okay, thank you. Nods from the back. I appreciate that. Well, then, Mr. President, if I'm reading my notes correctly, then this is the budget bill that has the university parity funding in it and the College of Medicine. Again, more nods. Thank you very much. And the foster care stuff and some CPS stuff. If I have my notes right, then I will be voting yes on this particular budget bill. Thank you, Mr. President. Do I have that right?
Senator Reagan votes yes. Senator Crandall, District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you. We talk about transparency. We talk about things that need to be done in light. I think this whole process, as we've gone through with a special session, suspending the rules and not allowing any discussion in any committee, is probably one of the most behind closed door sessions that I've seen since I've been down here. And we've been accused a lot of times of doing things behind closed doors, but this one, I think, has really been there. And I think we, as state legislators, owe the public a lot more of the openness and transparency that this budget is going to impact in taxes, and I think we owe it to the public to be able to do that. I'm going to be voting no on all of these bills simply because we did not go through the proper process in being able to have a negotiated budget and let the public have input as to what happens with this that they are going to be paying for. So with that, I vote no.
Senator Crandall votes no. Senator Yee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Members, one of my favorite things that I enjoy doing during the week is when we have school children come and visit us and we have the opportunity to share with them how we pass bills down here. And these laws are just so important, and I talk about the processes we go through our committees and our caucuses and the debates that we have between the colleagues. I share with them that we have 3 distinct branches of government, and each branch has unique and separate responsibilities, and these are all done appropriately so that we can have the checks and balances in place. And these separations of powers is there so that there isn't overreach from one branch into the other. I think this is important for our young children to know because our founding fathers were very thoughtful in providing this type of government so that we would have a good and prudent practice for the purpose of the people and for the taxpayers to protect their dollars. I happen to believe this too. But in this process that we have undergone in the last couple of days, it was nothing like this process that I share, and I'm so proud to talk about with these young children that come to visit us each week from the various schools across the state. We today are voting on a budget that literally hundreds of people will be affected by. Millions of dollars from state taxpayers are put into a budget that we have quite frankly not discussed in committees or caucuses. And this was handed down to us without any understanding of what was contained in these bills. And yesterday, we saw rules being suspended, and we saw bills come to the floor without any debate, no transparency in the process. When asked on floor debates about what was actually in these provisions, in these large amendments, people chose to not answer those questions, maybe because they didn't know, maybe because we're just going so fast through this process, and we are still yet voting on all of these bills. There were no answers to many of the questions asked, and people chose not to yield for clarification of exactly what we were voting for. And we have to ask ourselves whether this is what was done at the federal government when we passed Obamacare, and they wanted to vote on it before they actually understood what they were voting on. This is the process we have now undergone and are currently voting on. And I find that to be so troubling, because I like to believe that what we share with our kids about our true three branches of government and the process of transparency and taxpayer accountability, that it all is real and it all exists. But I didn't see that happen, and I am so disappointed. I just hope that we might move forward after this special session and come back together, not only as a caucus, but as a body that should hold proper decorum, that should hold transparency in place, and that we would have the taxpayer accountability at all measures throughout the entire process. And for those reasons, I have to vote no.
Senator Yee votes no. I'd like to explain my vote. This is the feed bill, so I'll just go with a couple things that deal with the feed bill. And I raised these, it doesn't seem like it's only last night or yesterday, but apparently it was. And some of the ones in this particular issue is with the feed bill, and I still don't know what's all in here. Haven't had a chance to read it all yet as we've really screamed through this process. But the Graham County, Navajo County issues, these are two counties that are really in substantial financial straits, and we worked long and hard to try to find some way to provide relief for them. That was removed. We had a domestic violence shelter, $100,000. $100,000 for domestic violence shelter. That was taken out. We talk about the problems with the SACE programming at the Department of Education. And we talk about how it literally costs tens of millions of dollars across the state to districts of all sizes trying to deal with the problems of a pre-Cobalt era, pre-Fortran era software program for our educational institutions for K-12. And some wanted to get some more money to get that resolved as quickly as possible. Maybe we could see a solution, but that funding was taken out. You know, there's more to the feed bill, and more and I'll make comments as I go. Since we all have known each other for a number of years, or at least most of us have, you know that I'm going to make some comments as we go along. But the one thing that I want to really hit with regard to the feed bill, because it gets to the nub of the whole budget, is that the spending level of this budget exceeds $430 million in new spending. And that's almost $300 million above the baseline, JLBC baseline formula spending increases. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that when we were in trouble a few years back and we made some tough decisions, none of us expected to have a structurally balanced budget in fiscal year 14. We didn't. We knew that we wouldn't get there. The 1 cent sales tax would be going away. But what we did is we set it up so we would have a cash balance. And we do have a cash balance. And that cash balance would carry us through for another year or two while we move towards a structural balance. There are just a handful of us who were here in the early 2000s when we consistently outspent our ongoing revenue sources. And some of us stood at those times and opposed those budgets and said, we will have a comeuppance someday. And we did. Well, when you spend $430 million, if you have that much in new spending, you have to try to get to your structural balance for 3 years in this budget that we're voting on today. The only way you get structurally balanced is to have a new tax. And that's what this budget has in it. It has a new tax. And that new tax is going to supply several $100 million in order to resolve that structural balance. So I get that. But I don't think anybody should deny that we're imposing a new tax, which normally the way we did this, the way the voters asked us to do is, if you're doing a new tax, you have a Prop 108. But the cost here of the tax, or the implication of the tax, is over $100 million per year above what is necessary to trigger the federal matching funds for the Medicaid and the Obamacare expansion. So I really have trouble with this budget, not just for the procedures, because a couple people have mentioned the procedures. This obviously didn't go through normal procedures. But I have trouble with the spending level in here. I had trouble with the spending level of the Senate budget that, as introduced out of approps, I thought it was too high. But this one, I think the only way you get yourself to the structurally balanced budget is with a new tax, and we all ought to admit it. So with that, I'm going to have to vote no on this budget. The system is now closed. The Secretary will record the vote. By your vote of 19 ayes, 10 nays, 1 not voting, you've passed HB 2001, signed in open session. The Secretary will record the action and transmit this bill to the House. Third reading of bills.
House Bill 2002, an act amending sections 3.10.05 and 10.122 Arizona statute, amending section 10.122 Arizona by statute, amending laws 2013, section 161 and section 1, amending sections 26.158 and 29.851 and 38.671 Arizona by statute, amending Title 41, Chapter 1, Article 2.1 Arizona by statute by amending section 41.151.24, amending Title 41, Chapter 3, Article 7 Arizona by statute by amending section 41.610, amending laws 2008, Chapter 291, Section 9 by amendment by laws 2010, Chapter 313 and section 16, and laws 2011, Chapter 343, Section 25 relating to general government budget reconciliation.
You've heard the third reading of HB 2002. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The system is now open. The Senate will proceed to vote. Senator Shooter, you've pressed your request to speak button, sir? Your finger's wider than you thought, sir? System is now closed. The Secretary will record the vote. By your vote of 18 ayes, 11 nays, 1 not voting, you have passed HB 2002, signed in open session. The Secretary is instructed to record the action and transmit the bill to the House. Third reading of bills.
House Bill 2003, an act repealing section 15.105 Arizona by statute, amending section 15.107 and 15.185 and 15.241 Arizona by statute, repealing section 15, Article 2, Chapter 2 Arizona by statute, adding section 15.249.04, repealing section 15.341 and 15.391 and 15.448 and 15.41 and 15.449 and 15.742.03 and 15.75.01, 15.808 and 15.901 and 15.901.05, 15.903, 15.904, 15.905, 15.906, 15.909 and 15.910 Arizona by statute, amending Title 15, Chapter 9, Article 1, Arizona by statute, by adding section 15.917, amending section 15.945 and 15.947, 15.947.01, 15.951 and 15.961 Arizona by statute, by repealing section 15.962 Arizona revised statutes, amending section 15.960.01, 15.963 and 15.964, 15.971 and 15.974, 15.996 and 15.1021 and 15.1371, 15.1372 and 15.2002, 15.2004, 15.2004 and 15.2011 Arizona by statute, repealing section 2003 2013, and Arizona Revised Statute amending Section 15-2032 and 15-2041 Arizona Revised Statute repealing laws 2011, Second Social Section, Chapter 1, Section 135, making appropriations relating to kindergarten through kindergarten 12 budget reconciliation.
You've heard the third reading of HB 2003. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The system is now open. The Senate will now proceed to vote. Members, I'd like to explain my vote. This is the education burb. What's contained in this education burb is a number of things that give me concern. Number one is the permanent increase in the bonding. I am concerned about that and can't support that. I never really got an answer last night when I was requested, when I tried to ask questions and nobody wanted to answer my question. Never really got an answer about how the performance funding issue was resolved in this bill. And I would like to have known, I believe there's the $2.4 million placeholder that was in the Senate introduced. And that would have been nice to have that reviewed, because I would have liked to know what the intention was in the 3-year budgeting plan for the performance funding. I was concerned, I am concerned about the structured English immersion sweep of $10 million. I thought it seemed appropriate to at least put that in to use. It had been sitting there unused and untapped for some years. And it seemed appropriate to use it in, maybe there were other programs that people might have liked, but the one that we had in the Senate introduced was a grant program for a software trial program, and where we see this in action, for instance, in Madison School District, it has proven to be highly effective, and it would be very nice to see if that would go through. Then something that was taken out and is remaining out in this budget that I'm concerned about is the district's conversion to charter school issue. It seems to me that a 12-month moratorium is appropriate. With the number of districts that have already, or excuse me, are in process of making that conversion, the anticipated cost is $20 million. That's this first coming year, and that's not even addressed in the spending side of the budget. And if you continue to allow that without having some resolution of how you're going to do that, and you're going to have districts do that on a more routine basis. It makes sense, actually, you know, and in a way, without putting any limitation on it, any capping, any kind of study that you're going to do, to figure out how you're going to resolve that issue, it has the potential to grow exponentially as in many hundreds of millions of dollars. And the last time, and I know people use this one a lot, but it's kind of like the alt fuels issue of K-12 education. This really could happen, where this becomes, and we haven't done anything. That's why it seemed to me like a good idea for a moratorium to study that issue, but we're not doing that. In fact, that was taken out. So those are some issues that I had, and with that, I vote no. I see Senator Crandall on the board, District 16.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I can just briefly explain my vote.
Please proceed.
I'm just going to pick one of the many topics that you brought up. I could speak to each one of them for a while because it's what I love on education. But I'm going to just stick to one because it's black and white. 20 years ago, we made a decision as a settlement of a lawsuit that we would pay for all repairs and new school construction. Now, that was probably a stupid decision to make at the time. I wasn't here, none of us were, so we don't know what all the facts were. Being the armchair quarterbacks and looking back, that probably wasn't the best idea to say, hey, we will pay for everything out of the state general fund, all repairs, new school construction. Probably not sustainable from even day one that we made that promise. But what we did is we said, okay, hey, we're going to pay for everything, and in return, we're going to take away your bonding authority. We're going to take it from 30% down to 10%. School districts readily agreed, said, hey, well, gosh, if you're going to pay for it, we don't need bonding authority. We'd hate to do that also. So they agreed to it, agreed to that 10% cap. Well, almost immediately, it became apparent that this was not sustainable. The state could not afford to pay for all the building repairs or the new school construction. So we stopped. We stopped almost immediately. Within a year and a half, we stopped funding the formula. We really didn't even fund it the first year. That's been going on for about 20 years where we don't fund our obligation that we settled to during that lawsuit. We don't have the funds to do it. So for the last several years, the school districts have been coming along saying, hey, wait. We made a deal. We would give up our bonding authority if you would pay for everything. And that was a good deal to make. Well, since we've stopped paying, the school districts have come back and said, okay, we'll use local funds to pay for it, but you've got to give us back some of that bonding authority. We're not going to ask back for all of it. We're not going to go back to 30%, but at least let us go back to 20% so we can do our own repairs, we can build our own schools. A very, very fair ask of the school districts in Arizona. What bothers me is people keep talking about on the Medicaid piece, hey, we're not going to take these federal dollars because they're probably lying to us and they're going to yank the carpet right out from under us 3, 4, 5 years from now. We yanked the carpet out from Arizona school districts after 1 year. It's been 20 years now. They're asking for half the bonding capacity back that they lost. And it's finally in this budget for the first time. We have over 43 districts who will now be able to do their repairs that we decided not to pay for. Now, this is in the budget. It's probably one of the better pieces that's in this education budget. I appreciate that for the first time in 5 years, there's some new funding to education. The performance funding piece, I'm going to talk briefly about some of the things you brought up, President Biggs, because there's, we want to be the first in the nation to have a performance funding piece for K-12. This one's got a lot of bugs to it. I went up and visited with the governor's office on this piece also. Not real jazzed about the $2.4 million because we pay in arrears in Arizona education. We're 1 year behind, so even this budget year, we're not going to know who does well until the following year. It would be just as easy to have this at zero and pay and put it for the 14-15 budget. But with the $2.4 million, what their plan is, hey, let's pilot this. Let's see how it would have worked before we put serious money to it. Probably a small cost to pay to figure out, do you get an academic return with performance funding? I'm willing to do 2.4 for that academic piece right there. Anyway, this is one of the better education budgets we've put out in several years. It brings additional money to charter schools. I do think, and President Biggs, the one thing I would ask for is we could do a study committee without a moratorium. And we don't even need legislation to do a study committee. I could call 25 people and say, hey, let's meet 3 times on district charters to figure out what we're going to do long term. I don't need statute for that. I don't need a moratorium. We just need to go out there and have that conversation. And everyone would be willing to come to the table, I'm sure, and run some kind of legislation next year and figure out if this is a policy we want. Maybe we do nothing and we allow it to continue on. We've asked districts forever to start acting like charters with freedom and flexibility. Now that they've stepped up, we're trying to slam their fingers in the door. I appreciate this budget that's been put forward. A lot of work went into it. And with that, I vote aye.
Senator Crandall votes aye. System is now closed. The Secretary will record the vote by your vote of 18 ayes, 11 nays, 1 not voting. You have passed HB 2003, signed in open session. The Secretary is instructed to record the action and transmit the bill to the House. Third reading of bills.
House Bill 2004, repealing Section 4130-1306, Arizona Statute, amending Title 41, Chapter 27, Article 2, Arizona Statute by adding Section 4130-2306, making appropriation, making a transfer relating to the environment budget reconciliation.
You've heard the third reading of HB 2004. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. System is now open. The Senate will now proceed to vote. Have you all voted? Have you all voted? System is now closed. The Secretary will record the vote by your vote of 18 ayes, 11 nays, 1 not voting. You have passed HB 2004, signed in open session. Secretary is instructed to record the action, transmit the bill to the House. Third reading of bills.
House Bill 2005, enact amending sections 808 and 3620 and 22-117 and 31-401, 41-191-03 and 41-747, 41-1641, 41-1724, and 41-1969-01, areas of statute relating to criminal justice budget reconciliation.
You have heard the third reading of HB 2005. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The system is now open. The Senate now will proceed to vote. System is now closed. The Secretary will record the vote. By your vote of 17 ayes, 11 nays, 2 not voting, you have passed HB 2005. Signed in open session, the Secretary is instructed to record the action and transmit the bill to the House. Third reading of bills.
House Bill 2006, enact amending sections 35-122, 41-117, and 41-715, areas of statute repealing section 41-1275, and areas of statute amending section 41-3506, areas of statute relating to state budget procedures.
You've heard the third reading of HB 2006. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The system is now open. The Senate will now proceed to vote. Have you all voted? System is now closed. The Secretary will record the vote. By your vote of 18 ayes, 11 nays, 1 not voting, you have passed HB 2006, signed in open sessions. The Secretary is instructed to record the action and transmit the bill to the House. Third reading of bills.
House Bill 2007, enact amending sections 15, 16, 26, and 15, 17, 45, and areas of statute relating to budget reconciliation for higher education.
You've heard the third reading of HB 2007. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The system is now open. The Senate will now proceed to vote. System is now closed. The Secretary will record the vote. By your vote of 18 ayes, 11 nays, 1 not voting, you have passed HB 2007, signed in open session. The Secretary is instructed to record the action and transmit the bill to the House. Third reading of bills.
House Bill 2008, enact making capital outlay appropriations for different departments of the state and for state institutions.
You've heard the third reading of HB 2008. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The system is now open. The Senate will now proceed to vote. Senator Ward.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I explain my vote?
Please do.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what the senator from District 6 and from District 20 and you, Mr. President, said, that I'm disappointed in the process as a new senator and a new legislator. The example that I think has been set during this session has been one that I hope to learn from, but one that I'm not planning to emulate in the future. I hope that everybody can learn from this and that we can take a different path as sessions go forward from here. And I hope that we all remember something that seems to be forgotten, that we work for the people who elected us. And as a liberty-loving patriot, I plan to continue to listen to my constituents and do the will of the people. And with that, I vote no.
Senator Ward votes no. Have you all voted? Have you all voted? System is now closed. The Secretary will record the vote. By your vote of 18 ayes, 11 nays, 1 not voting, you have passed HB 2008. Signed in open session, the Secretary is instructed to record the action and transmit the bill to the House. Third reading of bills.
House Bill 2009, an act amending Section 32, 1134, and revised Section amending Title 41, Chapter 10, Article 1, and revised Section providing Section 41, 1519, amending Section 41, 2013, and 42, 50, 31, 01, 42, 50, 61, and 42, 50, 75, and 41, 51, 59, 42, 60, 04, and 43, 1088. Areas and by section making appropriations relating to budget reconciliation.
You've heard the third reading of HB 2009. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The system is now open. The Senate will now proceed to vote. Senator Crandall, District 16.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I can briefly explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Members, by way of explaining my vote, I want to talk about revenue for one quick second. 4 years ago, the Helios Foundation stepped up with $350,000. The governor stepped up with $150,000 to pilot an ACT project. As you know, we're the lowest percentage test taking of ACT or SAT in the country. Governor wanted to change that, so did Helios. I think Intel gave a little bit of money, the Whiteman Foundation. Anyway, I just got an interesting email from ACT. That year, we had nobody in Arizona score a perfect 36 on the ACT. That was 4 years ago. Since then, we've seen some nice improvements. This Tuesday at the Diamondbacks game, we're going to recognize 23 Arizona kids who got a perfect ACT score of 36. I know many of you did that also back in high school, so it's probably no big deal to you guys. But for some of us, who only scored a 35, it's really crushing, 29. Okay. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is because we make investments in education. That would not have happened had Governor Brewer not stepped up with some of that money, with Helios not stepped up. They've proven that it makes a difference as we continue to improve our scores. The one thing that you'd be intrigued is to see where those perfect scores came from. They are across the state, privates, parochials, charters, and districts. Hamilton, Red Mountain, Basis, Sonoran Science down in Tucson had one. Phoenix Country Day had one. They're all over the state. It was really a neat list to see those 23 kids. And so we'll be with them next Tuesday. They get a jersey with their name on it with the number 36 that ACT pays for. But anyway, we're making progress in the state. We have some bright campfires of good things happening. But with that, I'm happy to vote on this revenue budget.
You may be happy to vote for it, but how are you voting for it, sir?
We will. Thank you, President. We'll vote yes on this bill.
All of them will vote yes. That Senator Crandall votes yes. I'm going to just make it. Senator Ward.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a little explanation of my vote.
Please proceed.
And I just wanted to kind of discuss a little bit what the nice senator spoke about there. I was one of those kids that scored a perfect score on my ACT, but I don't think it was because the government invested in me. It was because my parents believed in me. They had expectations of me, and I had expectations of myself. And, I think that anyone can do anything if they put their mind to it. So thank you. With that, I vote no.
Senator Ward votes no. I would just want to comment with regard to a couple of things in here. I asked these questions the other night, and they weren't answered, as you know, those of you who were here. No, I asked a number of questions on many of these bills, and none of them were answered until the last bill. Then someone answered. But I am concerned about the taking interest from the rainy day fund and putting it into arts and parks. I think those seem like an interesting allocation of that money. Then I know that everybody likes to do a little economic stimulus now and then, but one of the reasons that Chandler had 3 data centers locate in Chandler over the last couple of years without any incentive money is because of Arizona's fortunate geological climate. We are really, you have the metropolitan area, which is one of the things they like to be in. You also have a very stable climate and environment to be here. We get hot. That's our toughest thing. But we're putting in essentially a commitment of $20 million over 3 years to become the data center capital of the world. And data centers, as you all know, they don't employ a lot of people. And so it just seems like you have a disproportionate investment to return on your dollars. And so, again, nobody chose to answer any of my questions the other night that I had about those, and I'm voting no. System is now closed. The Secretary will record the vote. By your vote of 18 ayes, 11 nays, 1 not voting, you have passed HB 2009, signed in open session. The Secretary is instructed to record the vote and record the action, and transmit the bill to the House. Third reading of bills.
House Bill 2010, enacting amending Section 9, 14, 15, 36, 427, and 36, 22, 39, and 36, 29, 01, Arizona Statute, amending Title 36, Chapter 29, Article 1, Arizona Statute, dividing Section 36, 29, 0107, and 36, 29, 0108, and 36, 29, 0109, amending Section 36, 29, 0301, and 36, 27, 2907 Arizona Statute relating to the delayed repeal of sections 36, 29, 12, and 36, 29, 12, 01, and 36, 29, 12, 02, 36, 12, 29, 12, 03, and 36, 29, 12, 04 Arizona Statute, amending Title 36, 29, 13, and 41, 10, 05 Arizona Statute, repealing Section 41, 30, 13, 01 Arizona Statute, amending Section 41, Chapter 27, Article 2 Arizona Statute by amending Section 41, 30, 2301, amending Laws 2011, Chapter 96, Section 1, and Section 2, amending Laws 2011, Chapter 234, Section 2, making appropriations and transfers providing for the conditional repeal of Section 36, 290107, and 36, 290108 Arizona Statute, providing this act relating to the health and welfare budget reconciliation.
You've heard the third reading of HB 2010. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The system is now open. The Senate will now proceed to vote. Senator Ward.
Thank you, Mr. President. You knew I couldn't not explain my vote on the health burb.
Would you?
If that would be okay
Please
with you.
proceed,
If
yes.
that would be okay with you.
It is
Thank
okay.
you.
Please proceed.
As you know, it hasn't been a secret that I think, and the majority of my constituents that I represent think that this is the biggest mistake that we're making in the Arizona legislature this year and probably maybe ever. I think that Obamacare is the biggest mistake that we've made in our country, and bringing it into Arizona is the biggest mistake that we're going to make here as this body. It's going to decrease the quality of care in Arizona, it's going to decrease access to care in Arizona, and it's going to increase cost to all of us. So with that, I vote no.
Senator Ward votes no. Senator Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Permission to explain my vote?
Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. President, 2 weeks ago when this body sent a bill over to the House, it contained what I thought was a very important piece, and that piece was the 3-year sunset provision. That sunset was put in by you, Mr. President, to allow a future legislature the opportunity to reevaluate what we're doing here today and to make changes if they think it's necessary. And although a future legislature could always do that, that was our guarantee that it would get done. That was the ultimate check and balance in my mind. Now that's been taken out. what we have back here, and that's been removed. I was asking her, and I had gotten no good answer of why that piece was removed. I fail to understand that. I know that there are many people in the business community who really support Medicaid expansion, and I respect that. But I was asking myself, I wonder how many businesses would make a decision to fund something so large and so unknown for an indefinite amount of time without a check and balance guarantee in place. And I can't think of very many companies in the private sector that would do that. But it seems that it's okay for government to do that right now. Mr. President, it is extremely concerning to me that that sunset provision was removed, and I must vote no. Thank you.
Senator Reagan votes no. Senator Landrum-Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Explaining my vote.
Please proceed.
I know that this has been a pretty long journey trying to get here throughout a budget process. And one of the things we know that when we push that time up to getting towards the end of June, it gets very difficult for our departments to be able to go forward and to be able to set forth of what their budget plans will be and their projections so that they can do things responsibly, including our various school districts. In many instances, most of our teachers should have had contracts by May, and it makes it really hard when we wait for a pretty long time to get a budget passed through. And I know that, I have to commend our body over close to a month ago when we did have a budget that made it out of this chamber. And we now had to come back and to be able to make sure that we got something put out and put out very soon. But I would just like to say that it's when you look at a budget and you're looking at numbers and you're trying to plan whether it's a private personal business or it's the budget of this state, numbers are black and white. And I just received, and many of you I'm sure already have it on your computers, but the special session budget that has come out by JLBC. It intrigued me as I looked at the numbers for fiscal year 2014, 2015, and 2016, and looking at the comparisons from the Senate regular session budget that we passed out and the House striker and then on to the special session, and looking at those numbers comparatively from the ending balance and the structural balance. Overall, the budget from the special session budget really seems to be pragmatic, fiscally, and structurally sound budget, because at the end of 2016 it comes out where we as a state will come out in the black rather than in the red, and certainly we want to do that. I've been around for a little while, and I've seen times where we had a massive amount of a surplus, and I've also seen where we've had very tough budget times, and we know decisions have to be made when we're going forward with this. And to know now that we had an opportunity to do the right thing for education, the right thing in the area of CPS, and certainly as we look at the Medicaid restoration, and knowing that the governor had to do a tough decision, but sometimes when you're in leadership, tough decisions have to be made when you're working to do the right thing. I do have to commend this body overall and just how we handled the whole process and how we did work, whether we agreed or whether we disagreed. We still moved forward in a way with class and with dignity, and to make sure that we could have that opportunity to, in the end, be able to pass a budget and to get up to the governor's office so that we could have something that will go out, of course, before the end of this month is over, and to do it in a way, a timely manner and a responsible manner. I wouldn't want to have seen where I've been around in sessions where we've even thrown a blanket over a clock because we hit at the end of June 30th. We want to make sure that we get this done in a proper fashion. And with that, knowing that we have done truly the right thing by the people of this great state for the second time in my history of a budget vote, I vote aye.
Senator Landon Taylor votes aye. Senator Melvin.
Mr. President, I'd like to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Ever since this issue of Medicaid expansion first reared its ugly head, and the more I thought about it, one word kept coming before me, and it's greed. When some people are offered the inflow of over $1 billion a year into the state, and they try to cloak it in adding $300,000 to the indigent health care rolls and other forms of justification, I firmly believe the bottom line here is greed. The people who want this know in their heart that Obamacare is going to collapse under its own weight, but they see the $1,000 plus per year for several years, and they want to get it while the getting's good. I truly do believe that is the motivation here. And then that money flows in all kinds of directions, including glossy mailers to voters. I received one at my home from the governor. That money flows every which way once the $1 billion enters the state. I can't help, as I stand here at my desk, to think about legislators down the road who will be on this floor and in the House several years from now trying to get the train back on the rails after this train wreck happens. And it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to remove those 300,000, as well as 30 to 40,000 healthcare workers that will have been added while the money still flowed in from Washington, the borrowed money. And I can only hope and pray that all of the measures that are now lined up to stop this travesty, one of them, we hope that one will work, including former Senator Antonori's effort to get this on the ballot next year and to collect over 86,000 signatures. I appeal to my fellow Arizona citizens to sign those petition papers to get the measure on the ballot. I applaud the efforts to try to get Prop 108 decided in the courts where this truly being a tax could have a 2/3 vote instead of a simple majority. With a lot of luck and prayer, we can overturn this, and I hope we're successful. And with that, I vote no.
Senator Melvin votes no. Senator Yarbrough.
Mr. President, may I explain my vote?
Please proceed.
Mr. President, a few weeks ago when we first voted on this issue, I did my best to persuade this body that this bill suffered from two fatal constitutional infirmities. First, I argued that it required a Prop 108 provision. Second, I asserted that the bill, even with a Prop 108, represented a violation of the separation of powers provisions in our Constitution by unconstitutionally ceding legislative powers to the executive branch. Now, obviously, my analysis and my arguments fell on deaf ears. Not a single proponent of this bill was persuaded of the efficacy of my assertions. And I will not repeat or belabor those arguments. They are in the record, and I simply remain convinced that this bill is unconstitutional for the reasons I previously asserted. I will note that since we last addressed this issue, the full power of the executive, some of the largest and most powerful business interests in our state, and the mainline print and television media have described the supporters of this bill as courageous and heroic, and I am sure that they appreciate the praise. On the other hand, the opponents have been the subject of much media criticism, and both sides have proven capable of demonizing the other. I wish this were not true. I must observe that we find ourselves facing what both sides describe as one of the most important policy decisions of a generation. Yet remarkably, we come here without the rules committees or the rules attorneys in either the Senate or the House having ever weighed in on the constitutionality of this bill. I cannot remember this ever happening quite this way, at least in my 11 years in the legislature. If avoiding the safeguards of the legislative process were an Olympic sport, the proponents of this bill would surely win the gold medal. Unfortunately, I suspect no one in favor of this bill is really concerned about whether it is constitutional or the fact that it reached this point far outside the normal legislative process. The proponents are sincere believers that if we will just do the math, if we will do the morally right thing, if we will do what the mainline media and some of those powerful interests with billions of dollars to gain tell us to do, we will surely vote yes. I understand that passion. Mr. President, I will close with a very short, simple story. Over 25 years ago, I attended the high school graduation of a school that I served as a member of the school board. The commencement speaker was an author, pastor, theologian, and seminary professor. And I would summarize his key point that day as being, never sacrifice the long term for the immediate. Unfortunately, by voting yes, we are doing exactly what he so wisely counseled against. And so, Mr. President, I believe this bill is unconstitutional, and I vote no.
Senator Yarborough votes no. Senator Bartow.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I believe I speak for many of my constituents and probably yours as well when I say that today I am extremely disappointed and saddened that our state, the state of Arizona, is willingly imposing this key provision of Obamacare, expansion of government health care upon its citizens. This after standing as an example to dozens of other states that followed our lead in passing health care freedom initiatives, guaranteeing citizens health care freedom. But now, even after the Supreme Court gave states like ours the choice to reject it, this body is going in exactly the opposite direction, committing our state to Obamacare instead of promoting health care reforms that could actually lower the cost of health care and insurance and that would protect our failing safety net. And we're doing it unconstitutionally by raising taxes without a constitutionally required two-thirds vote of this legislature. In fact, at no time, as my colleague just mentioned, has this Obamacare expansion plan in either chamber gone through the Rules Committee to discover whether the vote without a Prop 104 was constitutional and in proper form, as virtually all other bills are required to do. Of course, the citizens of this state will have their day in court on this, no doubt. But citizens are going to be hurt in many other ways if the proposal passes. People making between 100 to 133% of the federal poverty level are going to be forced into Medicaid. If states opt out of expansion, their citizens could otherwise qualify for private insurance subsidies in the exchanges. And make no mistake, that would be much better because it allows for choices in private insurance and more timely health care for them. Instead, people who fall within this eligibility level will be denied that opportunity. In addition, This bill, if enacted, is going to expand funding for organizations that provide abortion on demand in Arizona. And unless Arizona wins the day in court on this issue, we will have no say in this going forward. Most Arizonans oppose their tax dollars going to Planned Parenthood and others that provide abortions. But here we are, once again, putting ourselves at the mercy of the federal government on this issue and doing it willingly. Instead, we should be funding health care for the poor within our means and on our own terms. Taxpayers can't afford Obamacare expansion. We're already aware that more than 43 cents of every federal dollar spent is borrowed. But what we are obviously overlooking is how truly unsustainable that is for both the federal government and the states. While Medicaid accounts for more than 20% of total state budget, it also represents the largest single source of federal funding to the states. The federal government finances 50% to 83% of Medicaid costs. And though the argument that Arizona won't save the federal multi-trillion-dollar budget deficit single-handedly, together, states certainly are already making a dent. The 18 states that have opted out so far will save $424 billion in federal spending over the next 8 years. And the more than $609 billion in total savings from if all 30 states choose to refuse this government expansion, that would amount to more than $690 in total savings, which would represent over 50% of the expected federal spending on the Medicaid expansion. That's no drop in the bucket. That's more than 7 times the $85 billion in 2013 sequester cuts, and more than half the projected federal deficit for this fiscal year. Rather than listen to those who will benefit financially from this huge influx of taxpayer money to the tune of $1.6 billion, in light of the questionable legality or practicality of any circuit breaker, Arizona legislators should heed the voices on the ground in Washington who know the federal fiscal picture up close and personal, like that of Congressman David Schweikert. He cited on the fiscal risks and structural problems with the plan. He issued this statement on Monday. Quote, "While I understand the desire of some of our state leaders to address uncompensated medical care, this proposal is simply too fiscally risky and should be voted down. Specifically, this proposal relies upon a provision of federal law that allows states to effectively double dip when collecting the provider tax, the first time from hospitals and then again from the federal government during the reimbursement process. Unfortunately, this provider tax reimbursement provision is currently being eyed by members of both parties to either be eliminated or substantially reduced. Should this happen, and there are indications that it will, Arizona taxpayers would be on the financial hook for the shortfall. That fact drives my opposition to this proposal. Unfortunately, this proposal is not a freebie for Arizona taxpayers, as some have claimed. It is structurally flawed and will very likely become actuarially unsound in the very near future. I would strongly encourage legislators considering this proposal to fully understand the financial implications of what passage would mean for our state and, more importantly, for Arizona taxpayers." End quote. For this and for many additional reasons, I oppose the Obamacare Medicaid expansion contained in this budget bill, and I vote no.
Senator Bartow votes no. Senator Lopez,
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to explain my vote.
please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, for one, am pleased to be able to vote aye on this budget and to vote for the restoration of Medicaid to the state of Arizona. In addition to providing vital health care for the citizens of this state and helping to make sure that we have a strong health care system, it also provides mental health services for persons with mental illness, helping them to receive the treatment they need to be productive citizens, to be taxpayers in this state, to be a part of our society, and to be a part of Arizona. And I'm pleased with that. And I'm also pleased that this budget provides a down payment, and I will reiterate that, a down payment on protecting children in this state. The extra funding for child protective services, child care for the working poor, the stipend for grandparents raising grandchildren, the $5 million in intensive family services, thanks to you, Senator Biggs, that we have in this budget makes a down payment on protecting kids in this state, and I'm glad to see that happen, and I am very proud to vote aye on this bill and the rest of the budget bills.
Senator Lopez votes aye. Members, I hope you will kindly indulge me for a few minutes to explain my vote. I will begin by talking about the assessment that is really a tax by any judicially defined meaning of tax. This is a tax, and the way this is structured, the federal government, the Bowles-Simpson Committee has said this is the way not to do it, and this needs to end. In fact, the words they used was gimmick and gaming the system. So that tells me that this particular mechanism for funding the Obamacare expansion is in some potential jeopardy, and that's a bit of a problem. Now, my colleague from Chandler mentioned earlier the argument regarding Prop 108, and I too share that. In fact, I have had the opportunity now to introduce that amendment twice and been voted down twice by this body, and I understand that, but I've read what little of the bill I've had time to read. I was looking to find out what the attempt is to get around that. And Section 44, I think, is the attempt to get around Prop 108, and the other question about unconstitutional delegation of authority. And the statement says this: the requirement that the director of the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System Administration establish a hospital assessment pursuant to Section 3629.01.08 ARS, as added by this Act, does not delegate legislative taxing authority to the administration. We see, you can put in an intent statement like that, but when this is brought before the court, the mere fact that you say, oh, this isn't a delegation of legislative taxing authority has virtually no effect. So that doesn't take care of that. And then actually the Prop 108 question is wrapped up in that, because isn't it interesting that you would feel the need to say that there's no taxing authority intended to be delegated to anybody? That kind of indicates that you're delegating taxing authority, you just don't want anybody else to think it's that. And so that becomes kind of a Prop 108 issue in my mind. And it's been pointed out, this bill has not been to a Rules Committee hearing in either body. So I wanted to just cover a couple other things with regard to this. Transparency has been removed. The drug testing issue has been removed. The SVP reduction issue, which will impose a greater cost upon the general fund, has been inserted into this bill. And I have to say that with regard to an argument that was made earlier on the floor on another issue, I have to make, I wasn't going to make this comment, but I feel like I have to. I'm compelled. You know, the filter is not on right now on this particular thing. It just seems odd to me that when one makes an argument that government can't be trusted, they use that as the example or the analogy on why we shouldn't make the argument that government can't be trusted, if you follow me. In other words, previously it was argued that, you know, you shouldn't make the argument that the federal government can't be trusted because we can't be trusted as government either. You see, there's kind of an interesting logical lapse in my mind. So, I mean, we could talk about the circuit breaker effectiveness again. We've already done that. You've got 10 points that are completely ignored, from 89 to 80%. Feds could reduce it to 85% before you ever even see the effective date of this bill, and you're on the hook. You're on the hook. I mean, you just would be. And that's literally hundreds of millions of dollars that would be impactful to the budget. And so now I want to just get to the contention that the JLBC budget and the information that was put out indicates that this special session budget is structurally sound. I will say 2 points on that. Number one, I didn't even know that was out because it didn't come out until sometime either late this afternoon or early this afternoon or late this morning. And why is that? It's because of the way this has all come down. This has been an unusual, frankly, I would argue historic procedural mechanism, the way this has all come down. But you really have to start peeling it apart. This is the first time I've seen it in a spreadsheet form. And when I see it in the spreadsheet form, the one thing I see that makes this structurally sound is the sweeping of several funds and then this new provider tax. Without those, it wouldn't be a structurally balanced budget. So I want to make a few comments directed lightly toward the executive, and it's just simply this. The Senate passed a budget out of here a month ago. It was my belief that we had a constitutional obligation to indeed put a budget to the floor. That budget went to the Appropriations Committee and came out. It was then amended on the floor, and then it was sent out of this body. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I do suggest, and I don't think there's anybody sitting on this floor that would disagree, that there was an intention that the budget would be coming out of the House this week. In fact, if I can just regale you with a real-life story, about 5:15 on Tuesday, I had just left my staff, and they had asked me what I thought the timetable was, and I said, I believe the House completes this week, and the Senate completes Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. I believe the governor would have gotten everything that she wanted. So I was a little bit surprised when the first time I heard of a special session was from a newspaper reporter called me at the Broadway curve, is about where I got that call, asking me what I thought about a special session. And I said, what in the world are you talking about? And I was highly surprised by that, and to come back and find that indeed we had been called into special session to do what I believed we would be doing within 3 to 4 days, business days anyway. So I'm deeply and profoundly disappointed at the manner, the way this came down. It isn't a matter of, in my opinion, trying to provide departments' budgets. Frankly, There's nothing in this budget that alters most departments' budgets from the initial Senate budget. They knew what was going to happen in that budget. And so, with that, I vote no. System is now closed. Secretary will record the vote. By your vote of 18 ayes, 11 nays, 1 not voting, you have passed HB 2010. Signed in open session, the Secretary is instructed to record the action and transmit the bill to the House. Senator Crandall, you want to make that motion that you've been dying to make? Is it okay with you? Get it right, please, for the special
Thank you,
session.
Mr. President. I will certainly try to do that. I move that a committee be appointed to notify the House that the Senate has completed its labors and is ready to adjourn sine die.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor will vote aye. Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it, do have it so ordered. I'll appoint Senators McComish, Pierce, and Lopez as members of that committee. Without objection, the Senate will stand at recess, subject to the sound of the gavel, to await the committee from the House.